All right, welcome into another live broadcast here. Podcast. I say broadcast, so you say podcast. It's Silver Linings. It's Adam and Rex. Of course, we got our guest on, Ben and Alice, who are on our podcast previous, and we're excited to have them on and let you guys ask questions and all the things that we talked about in that last podcast we had them on. Lives are for you guys. You guys can send as many questions as you want. We're going to try to answer as many questions live as we go through this next hour here on Silver Lining Podcast. But before we do, let's talk real quick about things that are happening next weekend. Rex and I will be in Idaho. So if you're in Idaho at Tylee and JJ's memorial service, we would love to see you there. Say hi to us if you see us. What else with that, Rex?
Well, we thought about doing a meet and greet, but that's what the 2 hours are before the services from 1 to 2. There's Mountain Time in Idaho Falls. Kay and Larry are hosting this. We love that they're doing that. We appreciate it so much. We love Kay and Larry anyway. Of course, we can't thank them enough for getting the investigation started, being the face for the media, getting the media involved and carrying the story. Thank heavens they did that. But now they're sponsoring or hosting this in Idaho Falls. We're grateful for that. They have 2 hours from 11 to 1 that we can just come and meet and greet. So Adam and I didn't think we needed anything more than that. Let us know if you think otherwise, but we're planning on being there for that 2 hours and then, of course, for the service.
And are we doing a live while we're there or are we not doing a live next weekend?
We should probably do a live just after that. That would be good timing for it. We'll be emotionally drained and vulnerable. So that's always good dynamics for a live.
Or a podcast.
On the live we did on Friday, Adam and I were a little more animated, a little more emotional than we usually are, because that's what's going on right now with the trial going and with just all the dynamics. It just digs up more emotion and we're revisiting things. There are new thoughts, new emotions. That's the landscape. And we'll be talking about dealing with emotions and trauma here during this podcast. In fact, if I can start off with a little story, I was at a family gathering, a birthday, over at my sister's house, not Janice, my other sister, Teresa, and with the family there. And I was giving family members these wristbands that our good friend Janine Harrop, I always get the names mixed up, but Janine, thank you.
Janine from Idaho.
She sent us these wristbands. And so I was giving them to family members. She sent us a bunch, and I'm just sharing them with family members. And one of my adorable little Grus, he's 3 years old, I think, great nephews. He came up to me and said, "So, what is this for?" I said, "It's so we can remember the people on there and be happy about being able to remember them." He said, "What happened to them?" I said, "Well, they all passed away." He said, "How?" And I said, "That is a wonderful question. And your mom and dad really want to explain that to you." And I thought, this little guy's parents didn't want my niece and her husband to have me tell the story. I think I would tell it very differently.
You would terrorize the kid, wouldn't be able to sleep for like 3 weeks, and then the way you did it.
Exactly. And so I thought, it would be great to hear how we've all been impressed with Ben and Alice and how they're handling what they're handling, how they describe it to us. And so I gave them a little heads up just when we were signing on. I'd like to hear from them how they discuss this with their children and about when the Lori trials were coming up. And maybe hear some insight how you handle situations like this in your family that's dedicated to communicating. You've all heard that Ben comes from a family, my side of the family, that doesn't always communicate well. Okay. So Ben and Alice are conscientious of that and put in a lot of effort to communicating. Would you all share with us a little how you talked with your kids when this first started?
Yeah, we told them we have a totally different last name. We don't know any of those people. Don't worry about any of that. If anyone,
the family must be crazy.
No,
so
it wasn't our fault.
Yeah, we didn't do this. I was in Iraq. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
No, we do kind of joke around a little bit about how the Connor family, my dad's side, our side of the family, is a little bit less communicating, a little bit slower to connect, and we see each other few and far between. But at home, we like to have an open line of communication. Now, we've had teenage boys for many years. We have 3 sons, and we get a lot of one-word answers, as any of you know who have teenage boys. And I also coach high school boys sports. So I'm used to interacting with boys in that age range. And at home, we get a lot of quiet moments. And then every once in a while, they just want to talk. And when they open up, they want to talk for hours, or they want to get everything out that they needed to get out. And so we have to be available for that. Sometimes it's at 11 o'clock at night and we're trying to go to bed. And we're like, oh, this is the moment when you decided to talk. But we don't limit ourselves. We don't cut those conversations off. We have a very open policy with our communication. We have a rule at the dinner table that there's nothing that's off limits. They can say anything they want. They can discuss whatever they want. They can say it however they want. So we allow swearing, and we allow conversations about sex or about murder or about any of these things. And so when we were, communicating about this, it was typical for us to have a dinner conversation about what's going on, so that they could understand these things before somebody else and their narrative or their questions surprised them by it. And I think it was really important to start those conversations at home before any outside influences manipulated their viewpoint of it, or gave them questions they couldn't answer, or caught them by surprise and embarrassed them, something of that nature. So we started that as kind of a preemptive way to prepare them and help them so that they wouldn't be caught off guard in a situation.
Boy, that's that. My 2 immediate reactions: one, that is tremendous. What a healthy communication style. And the other is, I know how Ben was raised. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. Ben's dad is my brother. And I went to school. I am 9, 7, and 5 years younger than my siblings. I was a save the marriage baby. I failed. But I went to school on how my siblings, Adam's mom, Ben's dad, my other sister, how they parented their children. So Ben, the way you have that communication set up in your family, where you can say anything, you can swear if you want to, you can express it, just like you were raised, right?
Yeah, just like I was raised. So this is like an only at dinner time thing, but it opens it up for other moments when, like, the boys are in their car with their mom, or we have these one-on-one time frames where they feel really comfortable talking. And I think, to your point, Rex, it was a lot of, I know how it doesn't work. I know how it's very difficult, and this was impossible for me. So I'm going to try to do the opposite. And I did a lot of, this is not what I need in my household. But I also perpetuated some of the problems from my childhood when I was a military dad. Coming home and being very stern and strict with things didn't work. It wasn't helpful. And so there has been a lot of trial and error and a lot of learning and growth that's happened in those relationships in our own house, for sure.
It's weird how
doesn't help.
It's weird how when you're raised, and everybody listening right now or watching can relate to this, as you're being raised, you see how your parents raise you. And then you think, when I get older and I can have my own kids, there's certain things that I'm going to do that they've done, and there's certain things I'm never going to do that they've done. Because of how you feel and how you know that what's right and what's wrong for you. So I feel like everybody listening right now has adapted something from their childhood, from their parents, and then have stayed away from other things the way their parents have handled things. So I think I think everybody's in that same boat. As you get older and you get your parent style from your growing up, what you liked about it and what you didn't like about it. And so I think that's admirable to stick to that. And I think I did that with Zach as well. So I just feel like, we learn and we grow, like you said. And sometimes we get we get so much of what our parents did. And then as we get older, we're like, wait, I sound just like my dad, or I sound just like my mom. It's like,
Yeah.
what is wrong with me? Right. So
Yeah, I think we will do that for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I run into this thing that I talk to a lot of my clients about, but it reflects on me at home too. I call parent hypocrisy. So I'll say to them sometimes, like, what would you say to your son if people have a negative view of themselves or a negative idea of themselves? And we've talked about this at home. Like, would you tell your 6-year-old he's incapable of that, or he's not good enough? And of course not. But we catch ourselves delivering these messages to our kids sometimes that we don't want to, by our modeled behavior or by our upbringing or by the things that we're used to or have done in the past. And it can be a really powerful experience to ask yourself that question: is this how I would want my younger self to have gotten this message? Or is this how I would have wanted to be raised? And that can be a very humbling experience sometimes.
Yeah.
But Alice and I might ask ourselves, like, are we in parent hypocrisy here? Are we doing the right thing? That can be a tough conversation.
Tough conversation.
You also start to introduce something like this dinner table time where they can say anything, and you kind of wonder, is this a good idea? Should I open this up to them? But I do remember one of the first few times that this was open to them, and Isaiah, our youngest, who is by far the most shy, quietest son that we have. And he started in on telling us about this boy at school, and he had brought a knife to school or something. I don't remember it, but it was something that was scary to him, and he was questioning it and wanted to talk about it. And right then and there I went, okay, well, this was a good decision, because I don't know when this kid was ever going to bring this up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been good.
Yeah. Fun and good. And
fun sometimes. Interesting.
We all did parenting by trial and error, so you just don't know. I was thankful, by the way, from what I said earlier, to have my siblings to go to school on. And that is just a great luxury, and I'm just pleased that I got to take advantage and learn, good and bad, pro and con, as they went through the trial and errors that we all go through as parents. I love this comment for starting off the conversation from Kathy McDowell. I like the way you walk the talk. This is for Ben and Alice, Adam. Boy, that's got a tongue twister for me with Alex.
Yes, it is.
Ben and
Well,
Alice.
you've called me Alex. You've called Alice Alex. Ben, you're next.
It's the trial. There's too much going on. It's the name on the tip of the tongue.
Yeah.
But Kathy says, I like the way you walk the talk. Ben previously spoke of physical touch being important, but we saw it in action with Alice here and you two holding hands during the podcast for connection and support. We've all loved the dynamics that you two have brought to us, and that's why we wanted to have you on the live with us and give people the chance to ask you questions. So Kathy, with the first one, Alice, how did you overcome feeling resentment for Ben being away and you being a single parent?
That's actually a good question. And it's probably one that I don't know that I've ever really thought about. And here's why. I think Ben talked to you guys about this in his podcast before, and that this was a decision that we made together. We read that book together. We knew what we were getting into. Not completely.
A little bit, to a degree.
Yeah. But we knew that there was going to be a lot of time away. This was something he really wanted to do. And it was a job that he really excelled at, but also had a lot of passion for. I don't know that I really resented him in any way for being gone. It was hard, and I didn't like him being away, and it was a struggle being a single mom. But I knew that this is what he wanted to do. It's what he was good at. He loved it, and I wanted that for him. So to be honest, I don't think that I really held any resentment for that.
Okay. Very, very interesting and insightful. Let's keep going with Kathy here. She just fired off a few questions, so I think she's been thinking about y'all's podcast quite a bit. She asked, Alice, will you continue to search for a professional therapist, or do you feel it may not be needed? And for the people that haven't seen Ben and Alice in the podcast, Alice was explaining she's not against professional therapists, but she hadn't found the therapist. And that is a theme I think we are going to be addressing constantly forever. It's such an important theme. So Alice, please, what's your current thought on that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So for those that didn't watch the recorded podcast, I've had a struggle, a journey so far in trying to find my person that I can connect with as far as a therapist goes, that I can really trust and connect with and want to be able to share all the intimate details of my struggles and trauma. I want to continue that journey, but I will say that I'm also open to the fact that I think therapy can be so many things. It doesn't have to just be talk therapy. Like, for example, what Ben does, EMDR. I don't know what is my ultimate
Like the technique that
technique is the word that I was looking for. Sorry. Technique that works for me. I would say probably talk therapy is one of the reasons why I haven't connected with somebody, is because I don't really know that that's for me. Will I continue to see, and maybe I just haven't found that right person. But I'm thinking that it's a different technique. I also think that therapy can come in other ways that, Ben might not really love that I'm going to say this, but I love therapists. Obviously, I'm married to one. But my form of therapy right now is that I've had to kind of deal with my own coping mechanisms and things, is that I work out every day. Every day I work out, and it is my form of just kind of that release. It's almost a way that I process things that are just daily things, not my trauma and things like that, but just daily stressors and things like that. So that is kind of how I'm coping with things right now. And it's working in a way, but am I dealing with my trauma? No. So I do think that there is a journey there, a continued search for the right technique, the right person.
And Alice has done some EMDR too. And so she has done some unpacking of some of those traumatic experiences, and losing her dad was really tough. And she did some of that work as well. So she has done individual therapy that wasn't talk therapy in order to get through some of those things while she's still on that search. She does a really great job of adding in the coping skills and making sure she's doing the self-care that she needs to do. So she is working hard in all of those spaces and still looking, for sure.
Well, let me throw a related question in from myself, and Ben and Alice, you know where I'm going with this, but Alice, do you think in your situation, a peer-to-peer type resource would be beneficial, or no? Or what would the conditions be where talking with someone peer-to-peer, maybe if they had some training, but it's not a professional therapist, could that be a possible resource?
For sure, definitely. And I'll go back to something that Ben said in previous podcasts that he did, is that one of the things you asked a question that was like, what's the one thing that you would tell somebody to do if they're in that moment of real struggle, anxiety, whatever? What do they do? And his answer was connect. And this plays in here in that if you can connect with somebody, and this is a different kind of connection than what I'm talking about, and finding your therapist, the person that you can connect with in a regular weekly type of situation, but just somebody you can reach out to and talk to, whether it's just dumping everything onto them, or maybe it's just hearing, I'm here for you. There's somebody on the other line, or reaching out to you, hand to hand. I'm here for you, and maybe it's just that. So yes, I think that peer-to-peer can be so important. It can change the situation in just that moment. It might not change your how you process things, or that you are processing it. It might not. I don't know. It just kind of depends on that connection and the skills that person has. But I think in that moment, it can really help.
And I would add too that the peer-to-peer thing is so important because it's non-clinical. And this is two people on the same level just talking. And they could be talking about difficult things, or they could talk about current events, or they could talk about their weekend. And there are healing properties in just connecting and communicating about any of that. And so it's very helpful to have somebody who can be empathic and understand this is someone who's going through a tough time, and they might just need to talk about something else. And they might need to connect to someone who's on their level, or shares a political view, or has had experience with this, but we're talking about something that happened over the weekend instead. Because that connection is so important and valuable, the non-clinical aspect of it can be very helpful and can lead to you being more open and being able to change your focus from the thing that's disturbing you to just having a conversation with your friend, basically.
Adam, how many times have we seen just that, what Alice and Ben just described? How many times have you seen that on the Facebook group that Kimberly started?
Oh, you see it almost at least once a week. Somebody says something, and then everybody comments, and then they all have therapy. And I've seen some people just talk about, I don't know if this is the right place to share this, but I'm going to share it. And then people will comment, and that's also connection. And that's also helping other people. And the group has helped each other. But I do see a lot of people talk about the same kind of things, like finding that therapist, or I just read a comment. I'm sure Rex will post it here in a minute. Somebody talked about, they, after hearing Ben on a podcast, they went to their therapist and they were actually open and told their therapist they've never told before. And now they're going to start working on getting help with that. The thing about going to a therapist, A, you got to find out somebody that you're going to trust. B, you're going to have to open up to them for them to be able to help you. Because I think half the problem is when people go to therapists, they're embarrassed, or they're not going to go all the way. They're going to go 50%. They're going to tell you some things. And I guess depending on the therapist, or how they can get that out of you or whatever, I think it's going to therapy can be a difficult thing for people to open up 100%. So I think connecting with somebody, finding the right person for you to connect to, I see people do this all the time. There's certain people that you feel, oh, I could tell you my whole life story, and they end up telling you their whole life story. I've had people tell me a lot of things that I probably shouldn't be hearing, but and vice versa. There's people where I was like, I feel super comfortable with this. I'm going to tell this person everything. And I just, so I think the connection with somebody is huge for healing.
One other thing I will say with going to a therapist versus this peer-to-peer that you've brought up, is that typically when you go see a therapist, you're working on you, and you're not hearing from the therapist necessarily things that they've been through. Maybe some therapists might share something here or there, but you're more working on you. Whereas a peer-to-peer, you're maybe hearing the other person's struggles, and then you're sharing yours. And it really is this, like Ben said, the same level kind of conversation. And so you're able to help each other by just hearing each other's struggles, and sometimes just knowing they're not the same. Everybody's going through stuff. Everybody is, whether it's their current thing or something they've gone through in the past. And sometimes hearing other people's struggles helps you with your own. And that's just not the same type of thing that you experience through talking to a therapist. So they're very different, but both extremely helpful, I feel.
Ben, I'm just too excited about your idea to keep it quiet. Would you review with us again your idea about using the book, and the context in which you told us this was PTS therapy, about having a book so a therapist and a patient can relate to each other, start the walls coming down just through the stories in the book. Could you recreate that for us again, please?
Yeah, sure. I read a book that was really important to my journey, and then I wanted to use that in my therapy with veterans. The reason being is because it is so hard to just open up and talk to a therapist. Look, I'm not the most aesthetically pleasing guy on the internet. So when people pop into a Zoom meeting with me the first time they see me and look at my beard and my face, and they know I'm a combat veteran from my bio, they may not be willing or forthcoming right away, right? Like Adam was talking about, you may share 50%, or you may be afraid to be embarrassed, or you might think you might be judged in your therapy session. And that's just a defense mechanism that's pretty common, that we all share, that we don't want to completely expose ourselves to this random guy on the other side of the internet. And we're going to take a little while before we're completely open and honest. And so one of the things that I did with my veterans is I had them read this book that was about other people's experiences in combat. And then I would just ask them, what story did you connect to? Or tell me about something you read in the book that made sense to you or that stood out to you. And I would just ask them questions about the book. And so then, because they would relate to me something that was someone else's experience that was described so vividly, then I could understand more of how they felt, more of what they were thinking about, more of the struggles that they might have had, because they were connecting to this other person's story that may be similar to theirs. And I think that that has a lot of value. And so in the telling of my story, in the telling of Alice's story, that's really what we want. So we want to put it in a book so that it can reach a bunch of people, so that they can say, essentially, like you would in a peer group, I felt like that before. And this is what happened to that person. I can understand these feelings. Maybe it helps them open up and connect. Maybe it helps them share their experience with someone else through these other stories, so that it feels a little bit more anonymous. It doesn't feel so personal and vulnerable. And then it helps another person to be empathetic to that, or to understand them better. And maybe that strengthens the connection enough for healing to happen.
That is such a wonderful idea. So Jane Harris, if you're on the live here, please weigh in on this, because when we talked with Jane originally about her idea of doing an anthology with the experiences of the optimists, Adam and I are hoping that many of you who are sharing your stories, or who are using writing your stories as a beneficial practice for you, a type of therapy, will contribute to this anthology, so it can be used as we try to develop resources, therapists that you might want to engage in your own help. They can follow the same type of practice, where they can offer this anthology and say, what do you relate to in here? And people can find, through your stories, people can find a way to express themselves without having to tell the story that they're so hesitant to tell. Because those of you that have shared with us, your stories are so compelling and so, I think, important. And obviously they've touched so many other people. That's why we have a community now. So I'm hoping we'll get the same benefit from that anthology. So please be generous with your participation, not just with your money. I'm not saying that, although that's always appreciated, but be generous, meaning if you have a story, participate in Jane's anthology. Tell people your story so people can relate to that and can use that. That's a good lead into Cammie's donation here and a quick reminder. Thank you, Cammie Day, for the $10 donation. It's always good to see you guys. All these donations in the month of September are going to an autism, following Lindsay Gandy's lead and Kimberly.
Hold on, Joe Biden. You said in the month of September. What month are we in?
Well, I think we should stretch this through September, Adam. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, you caught me on that. Yes, April. In the month of April, these are going to an autism charity. Thanks to Kimberly and Lindsay's lead in this.
Hold on, I never should have said Biden. We're not going politics again. Please do not make comments about anything negative about Biden. I apologize right off the bat.
Just
in our family, we don't do political conversations.
We're not doing anything political. I just was going off of what is going on in the news.
If you guys want to come to dinner, you can say whatever you want about any politics.
Let me come to yes, religion, politics, sports. I could just
once dinner is over.
Invite me to dinner. I would love to give me an hour of making people listen to me.
So thank you, Cammie.
Or go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Cammie, and please continue to donate, and we will pass that on to the same charity that the merch store is supporting during the month of April 2024.
There you go.
Thank you for catching me on that.
I do it all the time. I do it all the time, and people catch me all the time. That always happens.
Okay. Well, I'm old, so at least I have an excuse.
Me too. I have the same excuse as you.
No. Please. You won't have that excuse for like 30 more years.
Okay.
Moving on here. Let's talk a little bit more about Ben's experience with PTS. And notice I'm following Ben's lead. One of many things he said that really, really affected me is he doesn't like to call post-trauma stress a disorder. And I think, there's a lot of wisdom in that, because it's not like there's something wrong with people, like they have a disorder. If they, in a situation, did whatever it takes, and Ben could describe this, did whatever it takes to push that trauma somewhere that has to be dealt with later. We get that. That's a human factor, not a disorder. So I like to just say PTS, following that concept. But let's talk about veterans for just a minute, Ben, since we've touched on that a few times, and that's another area where we really want to be a resource. Does the VA recognize that PTS is not just for those that saw combat?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting because when I first got diagnosed, they labeled it as PTSD and MDD, major depressive disorder. And they said, these are the two things that you have. Now you can go see counseling for it. And when I went to counseling in 2009 at the VA, they were unwilling to talk to me about anything other than my military experience. They didn't want to talk about my family. They didn't want to talk about religion, nothing from the past. This was only to be focused on the terrible things that I saw in combat. What a disservice that was. And there were so many veterans that jumped right out of counseling because I'll tell you what, and this is anecdotal, don't put this in the evidence-based research findings or anything like that. But the large majority, it's almost every single time that I see a veteran, the things that we find are the root of the problem, the things that we deal with that really relieve their post-traumatic stress symptoms and the things that are really hurting their connection and their family relationships are not related to combat. The VA has done a good job now in the recent years of recognizing that there are other things affecting people besides their military service, and that a lot of times their military service has only exacerbated what was already in the background. So yes, the VA does recognize that now. they've moved away from some of the older techniques they've used and started developing more programs like EMDR. They're a long way away because they're overwhelmed by the volume. And so they don't have resources. For example, when I wanted to get Alice treated, I'm covered by the VA for my military service and my PTS diagnosis. I can go see a therapist there, but my wife is not covered. I didn't retire from the military, so it's a totally different system for insurance. And so they're moving in the right direction. They don't have everything sorted out. They do other things like yoga and equine therapy, like what Alice was talking about. Sometimes a therapist connection isn't the only thing that can help you heal. And so they are doing some different things, and they are moving into the direction of wellness, which is more of an all-encompassing idea, physical and mental health and mind and body connection and all of those things. It's tough. It's very difficult.
The follow-on to that from Kathy, you started touching on, does the VA still not have spousal or family counsel, just for individual or vets? What's the current?
And these things are so hard because we have so many people that are affected by this that are not veterans, that didn't serve in the military, but served through being the spouse or the family member. And so there are a lot of other organizations. I call it Veterans Helping Veterans, because typically what happens is a veteran can't get the care that they really need for either them or their family. And they create a nonprofit to help other people get that care or to bridge that gap. And so there are a ton of organizations, probably where you live, harder to find online because they're mostly run in a nonprofit way, people doing the best they can to heal other people that are veterans or family members of veterans. And there's a great one in San Antonio that does free counseling for veterans and their spouse. So they do couples counseling, and then they have some family counseling things. The VA does not provide that, to my knowledge, and I'm still in that system, not working for them at present, but as a patient, and I still struggle with getting everything that I need. And they, denied my compensation while I was going through their therapy program for the thing they diagnosed me with. So yeah, there's a lot of tough things happening there, still very inadequate. But there are a ton of people that are trying to make that difference and bridge that gap and provide all of this. And so there's likely someone close to you, someone in your local area, or just a state away or something that's offering what you need.
Ben, I'm here if you need someone to talk to. Go ahead. Let's do a therapy session.
Yeah, you can teach me to play pickleball and I'll unload.
Hey, like Alice said, for a lot of people, you have to get rid of some stuff. Like when you're holding in, she works out and it releases stuff. I know my mom runs or walks a mile or 2 miles every night before she goes to bed so she can sleep. I go to the gym every day and I play pickleball. So physically, there's a way to release some of it. I'm not saying the mental, stuff is all gone, but if you had never tried physical exhaustion, whatever it is, completely, at the end of the day, get it all out. So when you go to bed, your body's tired, everything's tired. There's something to it that helps. At least it helps me. It helps Alice, helps my mom. I'm sure it helps other people.
And I'll add that, don't be afraid to be creative. Maybe it's not something that's super physical as far as running, like you just said, your mom does, Adam. Maybe it's stretching. Maybe it's going in your garden and pulling weeds, which is still physical activity, but you don't like exercise, but it's something that you're physically doing, that can give you that kind of release. So don't be afraid to kind of search for that. If you're like somebody that's going, I don't know, I don't really like to work out. Okay, but what do you like to do that maybe you like to dance, turn on some music and just
something. Yeah.
Dancing. Right. Yeah.
And
I think that's Rex's. I think he probably turns on some music and does the dancing part.
That's exactly what I do. Only by myself, though. I want to spare anyone else the trauma of that.
So we're not trying to create more.
So exactly. So Tammy jumped right on this and donated again, and also said she's coming to dinner with Alice and Ben. So that's going to be Cammie's way to cope. She's got to go get some therapy swearing at the dinner table. Good job, Cammie, and thank you for the donation.
I think Ben and Alice's dinner table should have cameras all around it, and this is a whole brand new show. This is a whole brand new show. I would watch every episode if you did a podcast with your dinner table, even with just your sons, invite a guest every time so they get to hear everything.
Oh, just imagine when they have their new girlfriend over. It's happened.
Gosh.
And they weren't warned because we just didn't think to warn them. And then all of a sudden we're at the dinner table and they're like, what's going on?
A new podcast has just been born right now. This is it. It's called Ben and Alice's Dinner Table. That's the name of the podcast. Go get your cameras, get your microphones.
Dinner with Ben and Alice.
We'll have an optimist to dinner. And we'll talk about all the things and say all the things we need to say. I do want to say that I got an idea from one of the optimists. I had a great conversation, and I don't want to disclose who that was or anything in case this is a personal thing. But they read a book that I had read, and I was talking about earlier using that story to connect with. And they had a great idea that I hadn't thought of, and I hadn't seen it from that perspective. But they read the book so that they could connect more with their spouse, and they read it so they could almost inoculate themselves from what they might hear. So these stories were combat stories. There were things that were violent and scary. And so they read this book so that they could prepare themselves and be open to the conversation they might have to have with their spouse and not be worried about it and not be triggered by it. So it's a whole nother use for these things. That I thought was really interesting and was a new idea to me, but very helpful.
That is just brilliant. I love that. Following our same donation thing, Adam, here's something I think we're on to. Alicia donated apparently because you called me Biden. It was so funny. So maybe we can get some comic relief donations here going. Alicia,
well, you want us to do some stand up here for 5 minutes and raise some money for autism? Well, let's do this. Give us some more Biden, Rex, and I'll just keep calling you Biden. That'll be great.
If you really want dark humor, we could do Alex's stand-up. Now, I know Alex is a villain in real life, and people don't want to hear good things about villains. But his comedy routine was hilarious. And it talked about your family, Adam. Talked about your
here's a great story since we have been on. So when we were younger, we were all over at Cliff and Elaine's house, and everybody was there. And I think Alex, we must have been teenagers, and Alex is obviously the most inappropriate one in the room. And maybe Alex was in his 20s at this point. I can't remember. Maybe we weren't teenagers or something. And Alex said something out loud, and then Annie Lane is like, "Alex, we don't talk like that in this house."
Those are my parents, Cliff and Elaine.
Yes.
No open conversation at the dinner table. No cussing allowed.
Yes. Well, whatever Alex said was
TV on Sunday.
Right. Well, whatever Alex said was inappropriate, and Elaine made him know that. Alex, we're not doing that here. And I just started laughing. I literally had tears in my eyes. I was laughing because Alex got in trouble, and I loved it.
And the continuation of that was, before Alex would say an inappropriate joke, anytime from then on, he would always make that sound. He would go and make a face. And then you knew he was going to say a dark humor joke or an inappropriate joke because he was doing my mom.
Because he did your mom's clearing her throat when your mom cleared her throat. So every time Alex was going to do something, he go, okay, here it comes.
Yeah. So
we all knew what was going to happen. Oh my gosh. See, everybody wants to watch this podcast. We're getting all the inside scoop of our family.
Yeah, they're more than our family likes to share.
Probably. Yeah. Sorry, Elaine. Sorry, Cliff. I love Cliff and Elaine. Yeah.
I just said to Ben, I don't think that they would like to be at our dinner table each day.
Yeah. It's not for everybody. Let's just put it that way.
So continuing the theme, the family members of veterans with PTS, Teresa Warner asks, how often do you come across a veteran child who needs counseling but doesn't qualify for it?
All the time. So they qualify for it if the member of the service member retired and continues their TRICARE benefit. And if they didn't, if they separated from the military, even if it was honorable, just ended a contract and moved on, then they typically do not have benefits unless that person is 100% service-connected disability. There are all these stipulations, right? But it happens all the time. There is a service, and I always mess it up. You'll have to just Google Wounded Warrior Program or Project. I think they're two very different things.
Okay.
I think it's Wounded Warrior Program that does 12 counseling sessions. They'll cover 12 counseling sessions for any GWAT veteran and their family members. So that's the Global War on Terrorism. It has a timeline attached to it. But I actually used that service to get my middle son a counselor, and he got to do 12 sessions with that counselor without us having to pay for it, which was amazing. And like I said, there are these services that do that because we know there's a need for it. And there are a lot of people trying to meet that need. But yeah, that happens more often than not, unfortunately. And I would say, just to jump in to add to that, people are asking about online therapy. I do 100% online therapy. I don't have an office. I don't see people in person. And I found it to be just as effective. Some people are a little less comfortable. Some people like it better because they can be in their bedroom. They don't have to travel. And then if they're unpacking something that's difficult, they're in the comfort of their own home. And so the therapy is effective. It does work just the same. A lot of those organizations use online therapy because they're not connected to people that are local nationally, because it's such a big area to cover.
And that's the question, as you said, I went ahead and put the question up, but that's a common question also, being online and how
I was
effective.
really skeptical about it at first. As a therapist, I went through the training to do EMDR after I received EMDR therapy as a client. And I thought to myself, well, there's no way I can do this. I need to be in the room. I need to feel what this person is feeling. I need to connect to them. And that's how I started. And the first time I did online EMDR, I was shocked because it worked exactly the same. I had no trouble guiding the therapy. The client worked through everything and traveled the same way in about the same timeline. It was just as effective. And I think that the key component to that is are you open to it? Are you ready for healing? If you dive in, then these things are going to work no matter how you do it. You're connected to it. You want to heal. You're giving yourself to that in a very courageous way, to be open and honest with your therapist. And that's what makes the difference, whether you're on the internet and hundreds of miles away or whether you're in the office with them.
Kind of off topic and on topic, just because I'm reading some of these comments that are popping up. And people are talking about, being brainwashed, like Lori and Alex. A lot of people think that they were brainwashed. As a therapist, do you know anything about brainwashing? Is that something that you would know anything about, being a therapist, or you know nothing about that?
Well, being in a strict religion and then going into the military and then being a therapist, I know a lot about brainwashing.
So brainwashing is a legitimate thing. Somebody can be brainwashed. Is that what you're saying?
I would say that there are a lot of things that people mistake brainwashing for, and you can talk about operant conditioning, right? And you can talk about Pavlov's dogs, where he feeds them a steak and he rings a bell, and so eventually he can ring the bell and they salivate, because we make these connections with our mind and body based on this stimulus or these cues. The military is amazing at operant conditioning. They teach you to do certain things with certain cues, and you do it without thinking, and that's for a purpose, because they want you to do it without having to go through the process of problem solving or your executive processing in order to affect something on the battlefield. It has to happen quickly. It has to be almost like rote memorization. Like if I ask you what's 1 times 5, you just say 5, because you
don't give your conscience a chance to like Rex is brilliant with this, with our conscience, because trying to process and listen to your conscience and follow your conscience, your inner guidance. With brainwashing, you still have a conscience, but you're saying that there's certain words that trigger you that you don't really go through the process of thinking about your conscience or not.
Yeah, and you have these built-in pathways, thought chains. You can look at cognitive behavioral therapy for this, CBT thought chain analysis. There are apps that do CBT thought diary, thought journal that can walk you through this. It says that a trigger leads to a thought, the thought generates the feeling, and then the feeling generates the behavior. And that process happens like this when it's happened before and been reinforced. If you were called fat when you were a kid and that's kind of an index trauma for you, it was something that was very disturbing. You may have been looking at clothes and someone walked by you and made the comment, who was a peer or someone from school, whatever it is, that was built and it's a paper chain at that point. But then it's reinforced by other experiences you have, other people you connect with, things you see on TV or streaming or advertisements. As a community, we do a really good job of reinforcing these negative ideas of self and these comparisons that some psychologists called shoulds or musts. I look at a commercial about a car and it means I'm supposed to have this type of family and this type of clothes and this type of car and be driving in these types of places. And I start comparison in my own head, and it reinforces my negative idea of myself. And so those chains are happening very quickly. And what happens is we start to react or we behave based on the feeling that's flooding our body instead of choosing our actions based on the thought. If I go back and challenge that thought, a lot of times it's a thought from something old. It's a thought from an experience I used to have. It's a battle I've been fighting or something I've put away. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be able to do this. Everything I do is wrong. This gets triggered and I'm responding to that instead of responding to my wife saying, hey, could you take out the trash? All of a sudden, I'm not good enough because I didn't take out the trash. I forgot to do it. Now I feel bad about myself. My volume is at a 16 out of 10. But the thing that she presented me is a 2 out of 10. That trigger and that thing that's in the background is all of the noise.
Are you trying to tell Alice you're not taking the trash out today?
Yeah, I'm going to tell my kids to do
it. Yes.
And that's what we do. And those chains are reinforced. They're built in. They happen very quickly. We're not aware of them. Okay. And so if we can become aware of them, if we can slow that down by doing the analysis of it, we can realize that sometimes the thing that we're fighting, the voice that says that message, is not the one that's next to us or in front of us. It's one of the old ones that caused us pain.
Let me ask this and clarify. Now we're talking about Ben's business. We are fine here. There's nothing wrong if you engage Ben in the appropriate way and he makes money doing what he does professionally. So we aren't trying to hide that this can generate business for Ben. This can generate business for Dr. Denham Slade, who we've had on the show. And the question, Ben, if you do online therapy, is it still limited to Texas residents, or is that just for volume purposes?
It is by licensure and state regulations. I'm limited to perform therapy with people who live in Texas, who have a Texas address. I'm in San Antonio. They can be in El Paso or Dallas or Austin. It doesn't matter. But outside of the state, my license doesn't cover clinical represented therapy. So insurance won't cover it. I'm not allowed to perform therapy outside of that. I do coaching services, which is different, which is non-clinical, and that's national and not limited by state regulations. There is a compact that's signed by something like 24 states right now, where they're starting to do reciprocity for therapy licenses. I assume that Texas, within the next year or two, will adopt that. And so therapists who have a license in Florida, for example, can also treat people that live in Georgia or West Virginia because they're all part of the compact. As soon as Texas joins that, I'll be able to open up my practice more. I'm also looking in becoming licensed in one of those states so that I can perform therapy in more places because I'm 100% online. It's very limited. Politicians are aware that mental health access is something that we need to promote and support. And so they're moving.
Ben,
in
we're
that
not doing
direction.
any politics on this show. Let's not go in. Let's not get into
We're trying to
politics
help
here.
people have more access. So that's moving right now. It's limited. That's where we stand.
Okay, could you talk just a little bit more about what does that mean if someone wanted you to coach them and they lived anywhere, you could coach them? What does that mean to coach them? What could you not do? What could you do?
Yeah, so coaching is non-clinical, non-trauma based, more behavioral and motivational, problem solving style coaching. I'm obviously a sports coach. I have sports psychology background. I know what I know from mental health. So that helps me to understand people and what they need in order to be motivated or change or do something that could be difficult, like accomplishing goals. And obviously I have training that crosses over into both. The difference is you wouldn't have a diagnosis. Most of the time, I think almost all of the time, insurance doesn't cover coaching because it doesn't have a treatment plan, a clinical diagnosis, and then their therapeutic process to get to an end.
Okay. Now, this question could open up a whole new avenue, and I'm aware of the time. Of course, we don't have a hard and fast cutoff, but I think we want to at least acknowledge that Debbie D asked this question because there are many others that would have a similar question. She said, any advice on stopping the family pattern of alcoholism? My dad, my ex, and now my son has that problem as well. I've tried talking, asking, and begging. Nothing seems to help.
Man, that is a tough one. That is a tough situation. Thank you for being, having the courage to say that in front of everyone and ask that question, because I'm sure there are others who have something similar to go through, to discuss, to try to solve that problem. Al-Anon is a great resource for people who are growing up in homes or who have had parents that are alcoholics or deal with alcoholics as their spouse or their sibling. That's a great, very well produced therapeutic resource. There's so much experience there. There's so much that can help. Alcoholism in itself is most often an escape or an avoidance technique. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to be feeling shame or feeling hurt or pain. And so I'm going to do something to numb that so that I can just make it through. So I'm trying to survive by using that in order to not process and work through the things that I feel like are going to overwhelm me or kill me. And so that's a very individual choice. There are a lot of people that aren't ready to face that pain, and that's why they're using it as an escape technique. So simply presenting that as an option, even in our lives together, it was something that I had to come around to choose that, because it is a very difficult process to go through healing in that space. And so being suggested from loved ones is great. Even that space where it's necessary in order for your family to survive, sometimes people don't make that choice to help their family survive because there's so much pain there and there's such a developed, hardened pattern of avoidance and escape that they don't know how to feel. They don't know what emotions are. They become alexithymic. I think we discussed that in one of these podcasts before. And so in order to feel, they have to get away from that process, that alcohol that's escaped for them. And so that continued question, that continued response, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. Let's do this together. I'm going to Al-Anon to get my piece of it done. If you do your part, we can work on this and we can get into that space for healing. It's very difficult in a family that has had that perpetuated over generations, just like abuse or any other kind of trauma. This is a very difficult thing to get into, and not everyone will choose it.
Enough of you, Ben. Let's get to Alice. She's got questions here.
Alice, a question from Ray Lynn. Do you have any suggestions for how you started dealing with the change in Ben being different? Do you have a book for family? Do you have a book for family and in the support to the change?
So I'm not sure if we're talking about Ben being different and like the way in which he affected me in a negative way, or his change coming out of like healing and, processing what he was going through and how he is different now after doing all of that. but either way, I think the answer is kind of the same. I always say that one of the main reasons why we made it through all of this time is we just have an unconditional love for each other. And I don't know, it just is what we found. And when you have that kind of love for the other person, you support them through everything and anything. And so that is really, I don't know if that's necessarily a suggestion. I do think you can work on how you love somebody and the connection and everything that you have. But this was something that we did just have, and we do continue to work on that connection. But so I don't know if it's as much of a suggestion as more of just the way that I am with him, and he is with me as well, is that we do just genuinely really love each other. And so I was always there to support him. I hope he feels that way, and that just, I was always there to be, behind him and support him in any change or way that he was going to come about these things. And even when they were negative towards me and it was causing me issues, it was, I had to remind myself, I knew it wasn't because he didn't love me, that he wanted to hurt me or any of that. So
I think
was there a book that helped you? She asked about a book. Have you read a book, or are you and Ben going to write a book to help people? What's going on with that?
Yeah, I don't have a book that I read.
You did read a lot.
I read a lot of books, but I can't say that
including every cookbook in the world, which is great. That was impressive. When you mentioned that, I was like, that's impressive. She knows some recipes.
I wouldn't say I am the best cook, but I do like to read cookbooks, and it is how I learned to cook. Yeah. But yes, we do plan. I know Ben has brought it up many times that, he has several books that he's writing. And then of course I want to write kind of like a parallel book on kind of what I was going through and how just kind of what we're talking about right now during this time that he'll be discussing in his book. And we hope that's helpful to people. So some of this stuff may be brought up at that point.
But there were times of suffering, there were times of pain where Alice was using whatever she could to cope with it on her own end and support me through my suffering at the same time. She was very open, even though I traveled a lot and was home very little, to me doing counseling or doing a therapeutic retreat or something that I needed to heal, knowing that that was almost a selfish act in the time frame because I was needed at home or she needed support. She supported me to do those things, even though it was difficult. And she was doing her own coping and self-care and all of that during that time. I'm sure that some of the books she read were helpful. I'm sure that some of the processes that she went to were helpful. And I think she'll detail more of that when she's able to write and get it all out there.
Awesome.
And something that I just want to bring up real quick, I don't get to read the comments as we're doing this, but I did see one from Carrie Ann, I think it is. And she said something, she said, I have listened since day one, but never comment. I can't find myself to see a therapist to talk about all the trauma in my life and fear of reliving it. I remodel my house by myself for therapy. I just wanted to bring this up real quick. Kudos to you to finding something that it is like a coping mechanism for you. That's something that I brought up earlier, and that be creative and figure out where it is that you can kind of release a lot of this stress. But then I also wanted to address, like, a lot of us don't want to talk about the things that we've gone through. And I have definitely felt that way and still do a lot with the trauma in my past. I just wanted to say to those of you that are feeling that there are so many techniques out there, and this is one of the things I was saying is maybe I haven't found my technique, although I will say EMDR, one that I did and that Ben does do, but it doesn't just have to be EMDR. There are techniques that you don't have to talk about the experience and relive it as what you just said. But you can still process that trauma. And EMDR is one of those. And I'm sure there's other techniques as well. So I just encourage you guys that feel like that to search for a technique that might work for you.
Where you don't have to relive it. We focus on that a lot because that was my first experience was the VAs. They did this thing called prolonged exposure therapy, which is like hit yourself in the hand with a hammer until you don't feel it anymore. And everybody quit after the first session, I think, or the second session because it was torture. We don't want to relive the thing that we've been trying not to talk about, that we've been holding in, that we have nightmares about. It's horrible. So there are techniques, and that is part of EMDR. You don't have to say a word about the experience you had. You fly by it like you're sitting on a train, watching it happen out the window at 250 miles an hour. And your brain processes the information without you having to describe every detail or write it down or say it out loud. So yeah, I find that somatic experiencing is one, EMDR is one. There are ways to go through these things without reliving it.
I would definitely replace the hammer with a mallet. Less pain. always looking for a way out.
And you would use a Nerf mallet.
The Nerf mallet. Did they make a Nerf mallet? Do they even make mallets anymore? Who knows?
Here's Catherine Peza talking for all of us. Ben and Alice, awesome couple. Thank you for turning your trauma into healing others. Just what we all feel. And we just want to keep this going, keep the group going, keep these topics going. Ben and Alice, we want to talk with you again off camera. We want to really turn this in, and we think we can get started sooner rather than later. So we'll keep the conversations going off camera. We hope you'll join us on camera more because everyone gets so much out of your sharing. Adam, any final comments, and we'll let them have the last word.
We're just grateful to have Ben and Alice come on with us. We're grateful for this podcast and the healing that it's brought for Rex and I. We appreciate all the optimists. And as we go forward with this podcast, the more that we can, reach other people that need healing or need help or feel secure or feel wanted or whatever that is, especially people who are lonely, invite them to our podcast, invite them to our Facebook group. And we just want to welcome everybody in. There's plenty of room for everybody here. And we'll see everybody in Idaho this coming weekend for Tylee and JJ's memorial, which will be, hard again to go through, but at least we'll have each other there to go through that.
Very good. Ben, Alice, closing thoughts from you.
I'll let you have the last word. I think that works out best for us.
Good. There's a smart man.
Thank you guys for your questions and your comments. And thank you, Rex and Adam and everybody who works together to help your podcast become something that can be healing for others. I want to be able to talk to everyone, answer all their questions, do all of those things. We'll do as much of it as we can. So keep diving into this stuff and sharing. I appreciate that. I know it takes courage. I know it's not easy, but I love the community that has been created here. I'm grateful for it. It's really important. Please keep reaching out to each other. Please keep connecting, and we'll do the best we can to support it.
I just want to say thank you as well. Like, this is actually really good for me, just personally, individually, great for us. Lots of conversations just about kind of everything we've been through. It's great to kind of review that with each other before we do these things. So great conversations for us. I'll end by telling you guys a quick little story. When we did the recorded podcast, I think I explained to you guys during that time, I'm actually a really shy person. I don't necessarily like talking about me, or I don't just go out and talk to strangers or whatever. I'm just kind of to myself. Well, when we ended the recording, I went and ran at the track that I go to, and there was a guy there that I had seen several times, and he was carrying a rucksack. And I knew he was training for the military. It was a young guy, about what Ben went into the military, and he was doing like lunges and running around the track with this ruck, and he was struggling, but he was doing it. And I stopped him. Not anything I would have ever done before, but I think because of the podcast, I just was feeling a little bit more like, I want to talk to these people and I want to encourage them and whatever. So I stopped him. I was like, hey, I've seen you here before. What are you training for? And he said, oh, I'm training for the military. And I was like, that's awesome. My husband went into the military. What branch are you going into? And he said the Army. And I was like, ew. But
You're like, what happened to the Air Force? You ruined it. You idiot. Just start yelling at him.
No, but I was like, oh, that's great. My husband was a PJ in the Air Force, and he did this similar type of training. And I remember those days, and it's tough. Good luck. And so he put his rucksack down, and he just wanted to talk. And he was like, that's so awesome. And then he was like, this is probably a really personal question, but how did you guys, like, was that really hard going through the military together? And I was like, oh my gosh, I just literally recorded a podcast kind of on that. You should watch it. It's Silver Linings. It's going to be released on Tuesday. So outside of my box here. And I had to come home and tell Ben all about it, because it actually is opening me up to talk a little bit. So with all that being said, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, especially thank you, Rex and Adam, for inviting us on and including me in this. I think he's way better than me, and he always says the opposite about me, but you could have just stuck with him and probably been fine.
Well, good call on that part on that one.
And thank you to all the optimists out there, everybody that comments. Love it, appreciate it. I'm so happy to be part of this group.
Awesome.
All right, thanks. Join us next week, Tuesday. You'll hear from Joel and Carm on our podcast, and next week we'll do a live from Idaho Falls. We'll see you soon.